Trans-Alaska Pipeline is surely the most significant event in modern Alaska history. It changed Alaska in virtually every way, socially, economically, politically. It's just a huge event.
People talk often about, kind of the slogan that we had at the end of construction, we didn't know it couldn't be done. That's the way it was. We didn't know it couldn't be done.
I was way more than a job. I mean, it was the adventure of a lifetime,
To me, it was at its time, and then the 30 years that it's been now pumping oil, it's illustrated the importance of the project. So to be able to say that I played a role in making it happen, to me is a very great personal amount of pride that I take with that.
People came here to make money, the craft workers, other people, you say, I'm going to go to Alaska and make my fortune. And someplace along the line, they caught this, it wasn't a fever, but they just bought into this notion that this was a tremendously important thing to get done.
As a young person, I read a lot about the gold rush days and was fascinated about Alaska. And to come up to Alaska and be introduced to a project like the construction of the pipeline, I can certainly relate to the people that were here during the gold rush days of how they were like, because I think the pipeline was very much the same scenario.
I was very intrigued with Robert Service poetry, and I had studied a lot about Alaska and the gold rush and what have you. And I decided that I would come up and try to get a job on the pipeline.
So when I came to Alaska, I spent one night in Fairbanks in 1974, June of 1974, and the next day I was up at a camp called Dietrich, which is just south of the Brooks Range, and I was there for 56 days, and I knew I wasn't going home.
I went out as a bull cook and then eventually did become a Teamster. But when I first got to Franklin Bluffs, it was in January of '75, and it was 69 below an ice fog. And there was 36 people on the plane, and we had on our full Arctic gear, and we were freezing. So when we landed at Franklin Bluffs, of course it was dark, and 6 people got back on the plane. They wouldn't even go in the camp.
Remarkable effort. I mean, when I just think about the man hours that went into thinking of everything that had to be thought of, and then thinking about it again, and getting every detail right. I think that was a remarkable part of it, and it's in a large part of why it's a success even today.
There were many things that were upsets. We found regions of permafrost that were undetected, which required the pipeline to be, instead of buried, it had to be elevated. There were labor situations that had to be dealt with, craft labor shortages of some kind, jurisdictional disputes, material shortages. In Alaska, as obviously always is the case, the weather conditions, tremendously variable, and some very difficult construction areas. Adigan Pass, for one, and Keystone Canyon and Thompson Pass down near Valdez as well, that were especially difficult construction areas.
And the more I work with the pipeline, the more impressed I am with the original designers. Think about it. The original designers were doing this in the late 60s. When they were conceiving of this and conceiving of the above ground support system, and conceiving of how you'd build a hot oil pipeline across Alaska. They were working with primitive tools compared to today. They were working with limited knowledge. Nobody had hydrologic histories of all these rivers. They had to go back to basic engineering and say, well, the watershed's this big, and the amount of precipitation might be this big, so we should be getting these flows, and then figure out what the scour depth was. They didn't have good seismic data on all these faults. They had to go back to basic geotechnical engineering and figure out all this stuff. And they designed this thing. And it has worked. It has worked great.
As we are approaching the renewal of the pipeline, 30 years into the operation, it was somewhat before the 30-year renewal, but the government was organizing all kinds of audits and tests and paperwork. to make sure that the pipeline was good to go for another 30. Mother Nature scheduled a test of her own, and that was the Denali Fault earthquake of 2002. And that was a remarkable success story in how the pipeline performed. We had to shut it down for 66 hours to make sure that it wasn't harmed. And for the most part, it wasn't. I mean, it was a matter of just fixing up the supports and turning it back on. But to have a pipeline survive a, magnitude 7.9 earthquake with the accelerations and displacements was a remarkable thing. I mean, the Earth actually shifted 18 feet sideways and 3 feet vertically. And it was designed for 20 feet sideways and 5 feet vertically. So that's pretty darn close. And I think that having passed that test was probably the quintessential evidence that this pipeline had performed successfully.
So it's opened up Alaska to be the opportunity, the future of possibilities that everybody always wanted it to be, but nobody knew if it could actually be brought to bear, if it could actually happen. I think that's the significance of oil to Alaska in the long term.
I think it's been a good relationship in a lot of respects because it's provided job opportunities for Alaska Natives. It's provided business opportunities for tribal organizations and corporations, and it's also provided a way of scholarships for young people.
My name is Joseph Cody. I was born in 1977 in Anchorage, Alaska. It's pretty much been a known fact ever since probably about kindergarten that the pipeline, I mean, we always heard stories about it, how it was built, how it was constructed. So to actually work for the same company that's so well known throughout the whole entire world, it's just been amazing.
I've participated in the transportation of over 15 billion barrels of oil to the lower 48. Certainly, 85, 90% of the economy of Alaska has been reliant upon the pipeline. So it's my life's work, and it's kind of the accomplishment of a lifetime.